And this is Ricky Warwick of Black Star Riders. Ricky, how are you, brother?
Eddie, good to hear your voice, my friend. How you doing?
Good, good, good. You know, I'll tell you, I was saying earlier before you joined me, we did not plan it this way with you calling in, but obviously right at the top here, some sad news coming out today
Sure.
with Philomena Lynott passing away. Ricky,
Yeah.
you obviously have fronted Thin Lizzy and Black Star Riders. You do both. Can you talk a little bit about Philomena and your experience with her?
I would absolutely love to, Eddie. Sadly, like you said, very poignant today of all days. She was a fantastic, wonderful woman, a real beacon of light, very positive energy, very graceful. And I had the pleasure of meeting her on a couple of occasions. The first one was the first time that Thin Lizzy played Dublin with me fronting the band way back in 2011. We played a beautiful theatre there called the Olympia Theatre, an old Victorian theatre. And Philomena came to the show. So I was nervous enough anyway, but the fact I knew that Philomena was going to be there, you know, I was beside myself with nerves. And, you know, during the show, I could see her she was in the corner of my eye. She's one of the old sort of VIP boxes up in the gods off to my left. And I just couldn't bring myself to look at her because I was thinking, what must she be thinking? What's going through her mind? Never mind what's going through mine. And we finished the set with Black Rose, and I glanced up, and the show had been phenomenal. And she was on her feet, huge grin on her face, crying her eyes out. And after the show, we went to the after show, and she's sitting down, and she waved me over, and I sort of took a deep breath and thought, oh, okay, here goes. And I walked over to her. She stood up, gave me the biggest hug, and was so gracious and nice in what she said to me. And she just said to me, she said, my Philip would have absolutely loved every minute of this, hearing his songs played with such soul and such love. And I think I burst into tears. And it was all the validation that I think I ever needed to hear it from Phil's mom, you know, to say those words to me. And she didn't have to say anything. She didn't have to wave me over, but she did. And she was so gracious and such a fantastic woman. And, you know, I'll just never forget that moment.
That's an incredible story, Ricky. It really is, because you and I both know, I mean, trying to go out there and play the music that Phil created and do it so well as you do and do it justice. Obviously, you're going to have the doubters and the people that don't think you should be doing it and what have you, but to have his mom endorse and embrace what you did with his songs and the way you delivered them, as you said, that's forget critics, forget anybody else. I mean, that's the only validation I think you would need for life, to know that you were doing the right thing.
You know, that's as good as you're going to get, obviously, without the great man himself sort of, you know, in some way letting you know that he approved, which sadly, you know, just can't happen. So for Philomena to say, any doubts that I had in myself for doing it, because, you know, I'm, like everybody else, I'm a massive, huge Thin Lizzy fan. I mean, it was the soundtrack of my youth growing up in Ireland, so I had the doubts too. But that just eased any sort of fears and apprehensions and any self-doubts and my confidence that I might have had. And it was a life-changing moment. I'll never forget it. And a great woman, and what a great life she had, and strong and majestic to the end, and so sad that she's passed away.
You know, I was saying this earlier, too, speaking about the life that she had. You know, it couldn't have been easy early on either, because she was, as everybody knows, Phil was biracial, and she was married to a black man at a time where there was probably a lot of discrimination, I would think, towards her because of that. And even the way she handled that and loved her son right up to the very end and continued to celebrate her son's legacy and the prejudices she must have dealt with at that time. It's pretty remarkable to think what a kind and wonderful woman she was. I never had a chance to meet her, but that's all I ever heard about her, is how wonderful she was.
Absolutely, Eddie, and still so positive all the time. You know, she never said a bad word about anything or anybody. And like you said, it was tough back then, especially in Ireland back in the 60s and 70s. To be in a situation like that was so rare. And people were so judgmental back then. People were always judgmental, maybe even more so back then. And to come through that with the grace and style that she did is a testimony to her. And, you know, she was always so welcoming to the Lizzy faithful, to the fans that would come over to Dublin to see Phil's grave. Her door was always open to her house. She always wanted to meet. She always wanted to talk to them. She wanted to hear their stories. She would tell them their stories. And just a wonderful, wonderful woman.
And one other thing on this, Ricky, you, as you said, have fronted what is Thin Lizzy for a number of years now. The band, you still do shows under that name, especially outside of America.
Yeah.
Is she the sort of arbiter, controller of the whole Thin Lizzy thing? In other words, did Scott or whoever have to kind of go to her and was she the one that actually had to sign off on you guys doing Thin Lizzy still without her son? I mean, how did that all work from a business standpoint? Does she basically still pull all the strings?
As far as I know, Eddie, I mean, I kind of stay out of the whole sort of Thin Lizzy thing. I mean, Scott just says, hey, we're doing a couple of Thin Lizzy shows. I'm like, great, where are they? I'll be there with bells on, you know what I mean? But as far as I know, the estate is controlled by Phil's widow and Caroline and Scott Gorham and Brian Downey. They have the control of the assets, as it were. And I think anything that happens has to be decided between the three of them.
And before we talk about Black Star Riders, what there is Thin Lizzy stuff that you still do. Is that mostly outside of America? Like where does the Thin Lizzy world stand right now for you in terms of shows?
It is. I mean, the last shows we did with Thin Lizzy was back in 2016, and we're doing 4 European festivals this year to celebrate the year of the Black Rose album. We're going to be playing the Black Rose album in its entirety, and we've got a stellar lineup for that. We've got myself and Damon Johnson, Scott Gorham, and Darren Wharton. Obviously, we've got Scott Travis from Judas Priest on drums, and we've got Troy Sanders from Mastodon playing bass guitar. So it's a wonderful lineup. But we're just going to do 4 shows to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Black Rose, and that will be it. And then it's back into Black Star Riders.
Yeah, and unfortunate too when you talk about celebrating the Black Rose record. Gary Moore no longer with us either. But what a guitar fest that's going to be when you guys all get together and play that.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the people that you have for that lineup. What I think is interesting, people may not know, is last time you played as Thin Lizzy, you had Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith playing bass, right?
That's right, yeah, which was incredible. I mean, a real fantastic experience for all of us. And I think for Tom, too, Tom had never played, I think, with any other act outside of Aerosmith. So it was a first for Tom, and I'm sure you know Tom really well. He's such a lovely, lovely man, and it was just great being on stage with such a legend. And again, he brought so much to it, and he has a great demeanor and a heck of a bass player as well. So that was a wonderful experience.
It's amazing, man. All the people that come out of, there's been a lot of people that have been in and out of Thin Lizzy since you've been doing this, and everyone that I talk to all comes out just saying how much fun it is to play that music, whether it was Richard Fortus from Guns N' Roses, Vivian Campbell, who, for Vivian, it inspired him to want to do Last in Line and really take over playing some lead guitar again. So most of them, all that I talk to, all say, oh, it's the most fun I ever had is getting up there with Ricky and the gang and playing Thin Lizzy songs. I mean, what can be better than that? And everybody is celebrating the music, but it also inspires them as musicians, it seems.
Well, I mean that's great to hear, Eddie, and thank you for saying that. I mean, look, it's all about the music in those songs. Of course, it's not going to be the same without Phil. It just isn't, and nobody would ever dreamed that it could be or that it would be. But those songs are so timeless and mean so much to so many people, and then the music never dies, So isn't it great to be able to get out and play those songs with passion, with power, and with soul, and keep the music alive, and keep the memory of Phil alive, keep the memory of Gary alive, and just keep Thin Lizzy, in people's psyche, and keep it there, because it's such a fantastic, wonderful band. And I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. It's all about those songs.
And one last thing on Thin Lizzy before we move on, Ricky, that I'm curious about. Obviously, you grew up in Ireland. You've lived in America now in L.A. for a long time. And I've talked about this with you and so many others, including Scott Gorham, who's well aware of it, that here in the U.S., Thin Lizzy is regarded as one song, maybe 2 songs with Jailbreak, Boys Are Back in Town. And that's all you ever hear. That's all people really know in the masses here. But talk about the impact for you as a kid growing up in Ireland and how Thin Lizzy is viewed there, and the stature of Thin Lizzy outside of America.
I mean, it's royalty in Ireland, Eddie. Everybody certainly of my generation grew up with Thin Lizzy, and we had a show back in the day on the BBC called Top of the Pops, which was on every Thursday night. And when you were a kid, that was a religious experience. You would watch Top of the Pops, 7:25 BBC One every Thursday night. And when Thin Lizzy were on it, here was this amazing band, with Scott Gorham hair down to his ass, Brian Downey playing this amazing shuffle on the drums, and then this singer who just looked like he came from another planet. When I was 10 years old, I'd never seen anything like this in my life, and I was just mesmerized. And then suddenly goes, and by the way, they're Irish, and suddenly you go, well, it's even better now. They're actually from where I'm from, And as a kid growing up in Northern Ireland, we were so starved at that time of bands coming over to play because of the situation that was going on there. So when it was one of our own that would play quite regularly, like Lizzy or Rory Gallagher, or even some of the punk bands like Stiff Little Fingers and the Undertones, it gave kids hope because they're like, these guys are out there touring the world, selling records, rock stars, and they're from here. So if they can do it, we can do it. We can get away from all this craziness that's going on around us and maybe try and get out there and see the world. So it gave us hope as a kid. And like I said, it was the soundtrack of my youth. I mean, I lived and I breathed those songs, and I still do. It was I have two older sisters, and they actually brought home the Jailbreak album, and that's what really got me into Lizzy in the first place, was hearing that record,
When you came to America and first started having experience here, did it floor you that the way Thin Lizzy is viewed here is just being the band that did The Boys Are Back in Town?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware. I mean, I've known Scott for a long time, and Scott told me a lot of the stories about some of the tours that they did in the States, going out with Queen and going out with Rush, and they were poised to really kick on and be massive here. And obviously Phil got sick, and then the story with Brian Robertson hurting his hand on the eve of a tour, and I think that kind of knocked the wind out of the sails. But it was surprising. Obviously, the circles that we run in is heavy rock fans, so they're well aware of the Lizzy catalog. But
right.
You sort of, people always, people say, what bands? And they say Thin Lizzy, and I never heard of them. And I say, well, the song "The Boys Are Back in Town." Oh yeah, I know that song. Everybody's heard of that song. But look, better to have that than nothing at all. That's the way I look at it.
It is The Boys Are Back in Town, like that is the one hit that the band had in America that you still hear all the time. But yeah. For instance, in Ireland, is that considered Thin Lizzy's most popular song, or is there another song or two in the catalog that are actually known there as the iconic song?
I think it would be up there vying with Whiskey in the Jar, which obviously Lizzy wrote when Eric Bell was in the band, which is the first incarnation of Thin Lizzy. That's obviously a huge song over in Ireland. So I think those two maybe are neck and neck. Obviously Emerald's a very popular song as well. Black Rose. Yeah, but obviously, like I said, the band is royalty in Ireland. They're just so revered. It's great. It really is.